the respected presenters, and they should they would have a good future work ahead and their contribution. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand.
Good afternoon. And now I would like to welcome Dr. Pallavi Devi, Assistant Professor, PG, Department of Law, Guwahati University, Assam, India.
Thank you, organizers, for inviting me to be a resource person in this seminar. Thank you, my dear friend Umeshwari. I should take the name of Daya and Wanri too. Thank you, they were my PhD's friends. So there are three presenters in this session: Dr. Rajashree Datta, then Vizi Vijayan, Dr. Vizi Vijayan, and then Sovaigya SP, right? SP, right?
Ma'am, I'm also there. My name is Abhimanyu.
Okay.
Ma'am, I would just want to make a small correction. It's not Rajashree Datta, it's Rajashree K.
Okay. Okay, fine. Welcome, Rajashree.
As per the list, I am the second speaker after Rajashree.
So the first speaker is Dr. Rajashree K. Then VZ, Dr. Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, since the time is very less, I think the first presenter should speak. Dr. Rajashree K. You can start your presentation. The rest of the participants, if you have any question to this paper, you can please drop your question in the chat box, or you can ask it in person, but you have to be very precise. Yes, please.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. Because of bandwidth issue, I'll be turning off my camera. Yeah. Very good evening to the chair, my fellow co-presenters, and other participants. At the outset, I would like to thank Shillong Law College as well as Cape Comorin for giving me this opportunity to share and deliberate on various interdisciplinary issues which are very relevant in today's context. And my topic is also interdisciplinary, which is in line with the National Education Policy of 2019. Pathways for using law school legal aid clinics for creating access to justice to the marginalized community. I'm a research scholar at Christ University, Bangalore. To begin with, the preamble of our constitution talks about the ideals of justice are social justice, economic justice, and political justice. And in alignment with that, we have Article 14 and Article 21 of the Constitution, which guarantees right to equality and equal protection of the laws. At the same time, Article 21 says that every individual is entitled to free legal aid. And now this is something which has been upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court of India through various decisions, such as M.H. Oscote versus State of Maharashtra, Hussaina Khatun versus State of Bihar, and many more such cases. Now, the case pertaining to this was wherein most of the under trial prisoners were languishing in the jails without getting access to justice, wherein the Supreme Court of India has clearly said that no person should be denied the right to have access to justice. And in alignment with that, we have the insertion of Article 39A of the Constitution, which was inserted through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in the year 1976. Now, the insertion of Article 39A was very important and very relevant and sets the context for the present study, because it says that opportunities for securing justice should not be denied to everyone or to anyone, and the state needs to ensure this through the enactment of suitable legislations, rules, and regulations. And pursuant to this, the Bar Council of India has tried to align the legal education to ensure that we are in alignment with the ideals which are enshrined under the Constitution of India, be it the preamble, Article 14, 21, and Article 39A enumerated under the Directive Principles of State Policy. Now, in this whole regard, the role of the law school becomes very, very important or integral, because the role of a law school is a very exalted purpose. That means to say we are not just there simply to teach law or to think like a lawyer. The whole idea, we have moved ahead from the case study method, which was professed by Professor Langdell, to the realist movement and the neo-realists, which rooted for the establishment of the legal aid clinics in the law schools. Now, the ideology or the theoretical underpinning of this establishment of legal aid clinics in a law school is to ensure two important goals. The first one is to ensure that the law school legal aid clinics are involved with the advancement of social justice goals, and at the same time are involved in critically training the students with the skill set that is required for them to be social engineers. Now, this is something which has been professed through legal doyens in India, be it the late Professor Dr. N.R. Madhav Menon, or be it Professor Upendra Bakshi, or Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer, or Justice P.N. Bhagwati. All of them have clearly talked about the role of the law students through the involvement of the legal aid clinics in facilitating social justice. Now, it is in alignment with this, we have the establishment of the first National Law School of India University with an ideology or with the objective of advancing a socially relevant legal education. As said and propounded by Carl Lewin or by Roscoe Pound, we need to see that the social engineers, the whole idea of a law school is to come up with social engineers and not to merely teach law or not to merely think like a lawyer or merely to produce lawyers in the profession. Now, this is also something which has been upheld in Inamdar Wahab Badashi versus Symbiosis Education Society, wherein the Supreme Court of India has clearly said that the clinical legal education that is imparted should basically be socially oriented, and the same cannot be diluted by the law schools or institutions imparting legal education in any manner whatsoever. Hence, this paper explores pathways for using law school legal aid clinics for creating access to justice. Now, with this, I move on to talk about the review of literature, which sets the context and the fundamental basis for this particular research paper, because there are 23 key important documents which were identified to understand through these documents as to what was the aspirations that were clearly elaborated through the Law Commission reports or some of the key important committee reports on legal education, and at the same time, the Bar Council of India rules of 1965, 1982, and 97 and 2008 have all talked about the incorporation of legal aid. At the same time, various reports have also been brought out by the University Grants Commission in the form of CDC. CDC is nothing but the Development Committee reports, which talks about how basically legal education should essentially align itself to the social justice goals. Now, apart from this, there are so many 23 key important documents. Why I mentioned this from the time of the inception of the first Law Commission report, which was constituted under Setalwad. We have the first Bombay Education Committee report post-independence, which was brought out in the year 1947. The processual justice to the people, which was brought out by Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. Report, the Silas report, which was brought by Justice P.N. Bhagwati. And in US also, we have key important documents such as the McCrate report, the CDC reports, the 184th Law Commission report, 189 Law Commission report, and some of the Supreme Court appointed commissions have also been taken into account to understand what exactly are the aspirations. Of course, we no doubt to definitely have a legal aid clinic which is established in every law school, in every institution which imparts legal education. But in order to understand whether it is matching the state of aspiration, in order to see what the reality is, we need to understand what the state of aspiration is. And in order to understand the aspiration, it was very critical or crucial for me to review most of these literature. And apart from that, various journal articles were also taken into consideration, especially the works of John Bradway, Carl Lewin, Mark Galanter, Dr. Professor N.R. Madhav Menon, and Upendra Bakshi, in order to understand what exactly were the aspirations that were laid out through these documents. The methodology that has been employed here is two. One is, in order to understand this or to make the problem visible, an ontological method was basically employed, and secondly, a case study approach was taken into consideration. Now, why both the ontological method as well as the case study method are crucial? Because both of these are very important for a qualitative study. Now, ontology is nothing but wherein we study the documents and we map the key elements of that particular document. So we have what is called as binary coding, which is done. That means to say if a certain specific element is present, that means to say access to justice, legal aid, or equity, or reforms is mentioned in a particular document, what we essentially do is we do the coding. That means to say we say yes, one. That means to say this particular element is present in this particular document. If a 0 is marked, that means to say this particular element is not present in this particular ontology. Now, this is validated and revalidated with the help of experts. And why a case study has been taken into consideration is to ensure that specific cases are taken as examples to show how they can basically be trendsetters or can be examples of using legal aid clinics as pathways for increasing access to justice. Now, the ontology, this is exactly how an ontology looks. Now, this basically talks about creating pathways for using the legal aid clinics. Now, the whole idea when we studied these 23 important key documents was that this whole idea or this particular framework makes the whole elephant visible. It's called as making the elephant visible. This consists of dimensions. For example, clinical legal education. It's an important component of legal education. Entity, what type of a university, what is the objective, who are the relevant stakeholders who are involved. The first level is basically called as the dimensions. Now, these under which we have elements, for example, the judicial, the administrative, professional, public service, university, social relevance, professional competence, all of these would fall under the dimension of elements. Now, there are sub-elements which are there, for example, the moot court, the pre-trial, the trial, the public interest lawyering, legal aid, paralegal services. So when you look at this whole problem, the whole idea of legal education has basically been unfolded through this particular framework. Now, when you pick up any element or any dimension or any sub-element, it in itself has the ability to give a complete meaning to itself. For example, I'll give you an example. Judicial clinical legal education through moot court for excellence in a public university for social relevance by or for the government through teaching at the bachelor's level for social development. So each one of these are, in any of these, you take it up in any permutations or any combinations, it has the ability or the capability of giving complete meaning to itself. And in this context, it becomes important for us to look at public service. Now, when we look at legal aid, it has a very one-dimensional view. But when we look at literature, when we look at these documents, it has various elements and sub-elements. For example, public interest lawyering, legal aid, paralegal services, access, equity, reforms, services, and community development. Now, for example, if I talk about legal aid for excellence in an autonomous entity, for creating access to justice, for the judiciary through extension activity at the master's level for social outcome. Now, one parameter that we need to note here is that the very objective or the very idea with which the whole purpose of legal aid or legal education, legal aid in specific, was with a social outcome. Now, at the same time, when we look at the objectives, there are 5 important components which have been laid out when we talk about social justice. Access to justice is one of them, equity, reforms, services, and community development. And when you look at these, there are so many pathways of using these legal aid clinics, for example, or this particular framework. So if there are 16 elements in the first component, and if there are 5 elements, so 16 into 5 into 20 into 10 into 3 into 2 into 1, there are 96,000 pathways of dealing with a particular problem. And now when we specifically come with legal aid, to the aspect of legal aid, we find here 4 into 5 into 20 into 10 into 3 into 2 into 1. There are 24,000 pathways through which access to justice can be created. Now, these are pathways through which the legal aid clinics can essentially involve themselves in order to ensure or to achieve the outcome of social justice. Now, what are the different various ways in which the social justice or access to justice can be done? When I use the term access to justice, it talks about physical access to justice. It talks about financial access to justice, equity. When I'm talking of equity, it talks about social equity or economic equity. And when it comes to reforms, judicial reforms, how an institution involves itself through the judiciary, through the mechanism of filing public interest litigation, or through legislative reforms, or through bringing about changes through policies, is one way in which they can engage, a law school legal aid clinic can engage in itself. Services. Services could be in different ways or different aspects. For example, some of the institutions have NSS, or some of the institutions have paralegal volunteering. So the different services a legal aid clinic can essentially do. Community development. When we use the term community development, it means to say what are the types of projects that a particular community, that particular law school has undertaken, or in terms of what are the awareness programs that they are taking. So this means to say there are 24,000 pathways or different ways and means through which this particular access to justice through legal aid clinics can basically be, can advance their social justice goals. Now, an important component or an element of this particular framework is this. This particular framework is a contribution which can be used by any law school in order to understand, measure themselves, and see whether the state of reality is actually matching the state of aspiration, which in itself is a unique contribution as far as this particular research is concerned. Now, coming to the case study, various cases have been taken into consideration. For example, the Tulane University Environmental Law Clinic has been able to create ripples, especially as far as taking up environmental cases are concerned. Of course, they have also been at loggerheads with the government, but this is a tremendous example of how a law school legal aid clinic can rub shoulders and can engage with community development programs, and also to ensure access to justice is created to the marginalized community. Now, the whole genesis of, for example, the Columbia Law Schools or the Yale University or the Stanford Universities have multiple legal aid clinics which they have. 9 or 10 legal aid clinics which are there, which deals with different aspects, for example, environmental related, consumer related, IPR related, criminal law related. And in fact, even in our very own context in India, we have the NLS, we have Salgaonkar Law College model, which is considered as a trendsetter or path breaking in itself, wherein the idea which was envisioned by Dr. Professor N.R. Madhav.
Rajashree,
Yes.
Can you come to the conclusion?
Yes, yes. So I'm with this. I think I'll move on to the way forward. I think keeping all of this in mind, there is an important internal change as well as an external change that needs to be effected as far as the law school legal aid clinics are concerned. I think we need to categorize and say what are short-term goals and long-term goals. The long-term goal should be is that the BCI should basically make legal aid clinic as a part of the curriculum, make it as a mandatory subject, which it is not. And a small-term goal would be aligning the institutional goals, the objectives, wherein certain services are provided to the society or to the community by aligning its vision and mission statement. It is also equally important to train the faculty members to deal with these legal aid clinics and incorporate various subjects such as poverty alleviation and other aspects of it, for example, agricultural related. At the same time, have dedicated budgetary allocations or allowances for legal aid activities. So with this, I would like to thank the chair as well as the organizers for giving me an opportunity to make this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajashree. So before commenting on your paper, we will move to the other speaker. We'll sum up all the papers together. We will quickly move to the other speaker.
Thank you, ma'am.
Who is the other speaker? I don't have the list right here.
Ma'am, I am the next speaker. My name is Abhimanyu Dev Singh Biloria. I am from Jammu and presently pursuing my PhD from Nav Nalanda Mahavihar, Nalanda.
Okay, Abhimanyu, you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Please keep in mind the time frame?
Surely, I will try to just go through the main points and come to the conclusion.
Please be
All
very
right.
brief. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to present my. I'm going to present a PowerPoint presentation. Um, I hope that my PowerPoint presentation is very much visible.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. With the permission of the chairperson and my dear friends and colleagues who are present here for my presentation, I'm going to talk about media cultural studies and about the 15-minute concept of 15 minutes of fame and TikTok. So when I remember when a couple of years ago when Jio launched its 4G and the free internet services were given, there was a meme that was very much prevalent at that point of time. It said that internet is not free. Actually, it is actually you are too free to use the free internet. So on the basis of this is my presentation. So the 15 minutes of fame is actually the quote by Andy Warhol, who in 1968 has said in the future that everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. It has a very dramatic and a very interesting story that why he said so and how his photographer that shows in the 1970s in the West. For 15 minutes, and that it was actually used in Rotterdam. It is written on one of his buildings. Now, what is the possible interpretation with the age we know years ago? 53 years possible phrase. The possible interpretation by Benjamin H. who is an art historian, he eventually summed up, he gave a very aesthetic and a structuralist perspective of the statement, and which can be concluded as in the future everyone would be famous, and not merely those individuals who deserve fame, but also those individuals who do not deserve fame. Now, my 15 minutes is another phrase that for the interpretation of the phrase, because of the many media individuals might attain fame, though virtually, maybe for a short period of time, but attain. Said that the tabloid journalism and paparazzi, they make the normal day-to-day activities of people so exaggerated that even a common person can be very famous. So there were many concepts out of it. However, let us talk about the derivatives of this game. Now, in 1968, Warhol has said that in the future everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. But what was the impact of his phrase on media and media studies, media and art and culture? So in 1987, there was a song which was 15 minutes in the sun, which was a direct reference to the Warhol statement. Then in the Ice Storm movie, the phrase is directly referred by one of the character, Andy, where's my 15 minutes? Then the British artist who was a sculptor made the sculpture of the TV, and on the screen of that sculpture it was written, in the future everyone will be anonymous for 15 minutes, which further became the lyrics of one of the William Robbie song in 2006. So similarly, in Marilyn Monsoon, in one of the songs, used 15 minutes of shame. It was actually used to talk about the drugs and the misleading of the youth. In 1993, the 15 minutes of fame, one of the music composition reached the top list. And let us talk about one of the very important things, 15 minutes of shame, which were repeatedly sung in Tim Minchin's musical composition. So it is talk of, and here the 15 minutes of shame is not as per the Marilyn Monsoon's drug addiction or rehabilitation. Here the 15 minutes shame is attention, which we can also talk about bull. Now indicates hence this phrase, impact of TikTok on media and media culture. Now the 15 minutes are 15 minutes in future everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. Now this phrase is interpreted as present because there are many by which individual might attain fame. albeit not enduring fame. Virtually anyone can be famous for a brief period of time. So this is how it is interpreted nowadays, and this phrase has become the part of modern discourse. Talking and TikTok is included in cultural studies academia. Now here the title is tiptoeing to the tip of TikTok. Here I have tried to make the consonants, or in Hindi what we call the Anupras Alankar, using of ter sound multiple times. So here how TikTok has started. It started in China in 2006, and then I'll skip certain facts so that I can talk about the fact is reported 21 million users, and out of which 738 were the first-time installations. There were privacy issues for various groups. Now, what are the important features that led to use of the TikTok? One of them is non-commercial lip syncing. So any person whom you admire the most, you can be that person by the dialogues or the songs or doing acting of the dialogues of that person. This is a very psychological gratification. Certain challenges are there, couple challenges are there, sibling challenges are there, pranks are there which are so dangerous it can actually ruin relationships. Now there are TikTok products also like legging, and they show the voluptuous figure of the women, and again objectifying women as a object of sex. Now data protection and issue policies, they have become the major concern, and which is why, and the threat to national security, which is why it was banned in India last year in June. And in America, scholars studied about the use of TikTok as a platform for hate spreading and cyberbullying, particularly in Southeast Asian countries. Now, many TikTok challenges or pranks they actually remove the curtains of the bedroom privacy, which are very dangerous. Now, why do people use TikTok? Here, I'm going to talk in detail now. The social media companies, they try to capture the attention of the users for as long as possible, so that they can do micro targeting into the psychology of the user, so that they can actually do the marketing on their mobile phone, and they do a lot of shopping over there. Now there is a particular For You page which is which creates an addictive like behavior over there. Another perspective could be address why people use TikTok is the use and gratification theory by Y. Wang with Sandstrom and Alhisi, and it simply says that a use of certain media can result in gratification of a person's needs, and only if certain needs of a person are gratified by popular media, users will continue use that media. Here, highly digital platform and social media use, particularly the TikTok. Then there are researchers and theorists on it who talked about it. Omar and DeQuinn said that TikTok caters the need of escapism from day-to-day problems. Some says it is the need of expressing creatively. However, usually it has a very negative impact. Now talking about the two major socio-psycho insights about it, there is a theory given by the classic social impact theory by Lante, and another theory is the self-determination theory by Ryan and Dickey. Now they say that this is a very psychological, and it has a very psychological impact into the psychological weakening of the personality. So now let us talk about the Indian scenario. We know that JCB and the Chai Pilo, hello dosto, kaise ho, chai pilo, that YouTube and TikTok games, and that is why I have titled JCB Chai Pilo. By June 2020, when TikTok was banned, by that time India had approximately 120 million TikTok users over there, which is the highest. That is the 44% of the TikTok users are in India. I wondered that people of the second slide, if you remember, where I said that it's not the internet is free, it's actually you are free. Is that the youth of my country is so much free and so much deviated from the aim that they are so much engrossed into TikTok? 44%. Now, unfortunately, when we talk about that, see that movie Spider-Man, the last dialogue of the Spider-Man is, with greater power comes greater responsibility. So when so much of data is given to the user, but Indian audience is so immature to handle that. There are double entendre there. That means they talk about vulgar and double meaning jokes, which have no limitations or age privacies. Now, fake life is represented there in such an idle way between friends and between lovers, which actually impact the people in real life, and we are living the practical life, not the idle life. Now people can do anything for fame. I mean, at this platform, maybe I'm going to quote lots of example in my paper, but at this platform I may not be very comfortable sharing that. There's so many shaming incidents over there. India is actually not ready for TikTok and free usage of data. So let's talk about last year, almost when it was before its banning, like I told about, there were more than 1.5 billion downloads worldwide, with India leading the pack, making it 44% of this number. Again, in June 2020, it was downloaded. In spite of being banned, there are still using VPN, that is the virtual portal something, and using some other versions of TikTok. There's still 20 million active users of this app exist in India. I don't know what is so addictive. I have made video on use of prepositions in on ad. There are hardly 300 or 400 views in past 500 years, but a video like JCB and Hello Dosto Chai Pilo can have millions of views in couple of hours. So we really need to see where the audience of where the youth of this country is actually moving to. So let me come to the conclusion. In conclusion, I would say that in spite of so many users, there is a very huge challenge with as a researcher, I'm saying it, we are facing it, and that is there is no study into the psychology of the particularly psychology of the TikTok users in India, talking about the very productive age, that is from 14-15 years to 30-35 years, or 40 years or 50 years maybe. The productive age is up to 35 years. So according to psychology. So there is a need to do lots of research. As a researcher, this is the challenge which I face. The entire paper was presented on the theoretical perspective. However, there is a need to collect the data, and we really need to save India. Unless we don't come into this field and do research, we are not aware that how much damage it is causing to it. So to the chairperson and to the audience, thank you for following me for less than 15 minutes and giving me those less than 15 minutes. And this is my phone number. Anyone can get in contact with me. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Abhimanyu.
I try to be in less than 10 minutes of time.
But it's more than 10 minutes. All right. But your
Oh,
paper,
I'm so sorry.
your paper was interesting and it's very updated. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So we will move to the next speaker.
Yes, you want the name of the next speaker?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
It's me. Hello?
Okay. How do I pronounce your name?
Minimol, Minimol.
Okay.
Minimol PG. She is a research scholar from NIT Calicut. ma'am.
Okay. Okay. My name is Minimol, and I am a research scholar at NIT Calicut. My paper is titled Land Rights as Human Rights. There is a need for the world to accept the fact that land rights occupy an important place in the human rights issues, as the state of being deprived of land or landlessness is a form of injustice. Land provides a place for shelter, ensures economic stability, and forms even an integral part of one's existence and identity. The denial of land can be considered as a form of denial of right to a dignified life. In many countries, owning of land is hierarchical and involves the politics of power. Landlessness is a condition of powerlessness. In many countries, people from the bottom of the society do not own land and are denied of any rights to claim their share of land. Voices against this violation of the land rights are heard from everywhere around the world. The reason for the denial of land right vary from country to country. Property rights of certain countries lack the provision of equality that certain sections of people have to remain landless. In some other places, in the name of development, people have to move from one place to another, leaving their land and become landless. War and conflicts of different kinds also push people to the end of landlessness. Dispossession among indigenous and aboriginal people in Australia has to be given emphasis and a special mention here in this context. Unlike other non indigenous communities, the Aboriginal community possesses a special and deep relation with their land. They prefer the world, country over land or place. It is much more than a place of dwelling for the Aboriginal people. Rocks, trees, river, hill, animals, and human come to their idea of country. They don't consider it as a property that they own. For them, it belongs to their ancestors who are believed to live in land, sky, and water, and to the generation to come. Country, according to them, has a life and self of its own. It nurtures and takes care of everything it contains, not just human beings. They find life in everything around them. There is spirituality associated in their relationship with the country. Their culture and laws are in harmonious with their land and people. Their sense of belonging and identity is rooted in their land. Their laws are nothing but their ways of living. It is the primary source of and place of learning. The knowledge of the land is the greatest knowledge handed down to them by their ancestors. They learn from the bushes, trees, rivers, taking care of their land means taking care of the treasures of knowledge. There is sanctity and sacredness associated with land. One of the greatest issues that Aboriginal people face today is dispossession of land. The history of dispossession of land in Australia has started with the arrival of colonizers. They considered it as the land which belonged to no one. So they grabbed the land from the Aboriginal communities, depriving them of their right over their own lands. There is a history of struggle against the dispossession of land in Australia by Aboriginal communities. The struggle began a century ago. It remains an unfinished project even today, that the ownership of the land is given to the people of Aboriginal people, although the government of Australia is showing interest in the affairs of the Aboriginal people. The Native Title Act is the first instance of recognition of the rights of Aboriginal people over the land by the legislation. The Act establishes that the Aboriginal people had their right over their land in accordance with their traditional laws and practices. The government considers it is important to recognize Aboriginal people's rights over their land for reconciliation. 1930s witnessed protests against harsh treatment of people in Mission and Reserve and against separating children from their Aboriginal parents and for land rights. Aboriginal Land Rights Commission Report 1974 recommended the legislature to restore the traditional land to the Aboriginal people of the Northern Territory. A land claims bill was introduced in 1983 by the Victorian government, established a Victorian statutory Aboriginal authority. Land related matters were considered by this authority. Even this authority could not solve the issue related to the compensation for the lost land. Such laws and other means uh, oth- such laws and other means to handle the issues related to land could not fulfill their objectives. Establishment of mining companies in Australia is one of the reasons for dispossession of land. Discovery of resource-rich places followed the intervention of government and resulted in the displacement of Aboriginal people, disempowering them of their rights and control over their land. In spite of the reconciliation and assimilation promises made by the government, it introduced certain legislations which took away the power of the Aboriginal people to resist against the large-scale mining happening in their places. These mines not only dislodge people from their lands, but also jeopardize the harmony of nature. It has serious repercussions in the form of health hazards and degradation of natural environment. The landless situation among the Aboriginal communities causes violation of a range of human rights. The fundamental human rights to food, water, housing, and health of the communities remain unattended, and they have to remain under the consequences of dispossessing their land, either due to mining or the loss of their entitlement. Although poverty and problems related to health are addressed as a violation of human rights, most of the international laws do not give importance to their relation to land, and right to land remain almost unaddressed as a human right issue. The link between land rights and the improved health was not given much consideration in political discussions of land rights. Poor living conditions of the Aboriginal people are often considered as the failures of the land rights evolution, by which the Kunkin half of their food supplies, whereas Pupanya community completely depended on the government stores. The Kunkayunti community showed superior physical health. He argues that researchers indicate that control over land has positive influence on indigenous health. But the leasing scheme introduced with the Aboriginal Land Rights Amendment Bill 2006 will disempower the traditional owners of the land. Land issues under human rights coming under international laws are made on the rights on the basis of non-indigenous concepts on land. Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, 1. Everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. Number 2, no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of their property. The Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2007, has an important role as a document that can give legal right to the indigenous people on their land. It states that indigenous people have the right to land, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. It can empower the indigenous people to own and develop resources on their land which have been confiscated, used, damaged, occupied, or taken. Economic, social, and cultural rights, including rights to housing, food, health, and work in Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, are connected to access to land. Numerous international documents identify right to housing as a fundamental right, and this can be fulfilled only when there exists right to land as a fundamental right. Right to housing cannot be interpreted narrowly. It has to be treated like a right to live somewhere in security, peace, and dignity. Security of tenure and protection from forced eviction are important elements with respect to access to land. The right to food and right to water are also intrinsically linked to the right to land. Right to work and health are some other basic human rights that have associations with right to land. Poverty is directly linked with the condition of landlessness. People who depend on their land for food needs, when displaced from their land, it is a violation of their right to food. Most of the indigenous communities across the world have to face this problem. When they become landless, they not only are denied the right to own their land, but also denied of their right to food, right to clean drinking water, and good living conditions. States have to recognize and reconsider that access to land can eradicate poverty and formulate various laws and legal and other policy mechanisms that are in accordance with the rules of law and in congruence with international human rights obligations. These laws treat land still as a property and something that has to be owned. These laws have to be sensitive towards the bond that indigenous communities have with their land. Providing land ownership to the people of Aboriginal community is much more than ensuring dignity, life, and equality. It is ensuring the very existence of a culture which has its continuity in its origin, the land. It is not easy to generalize land rights movements in India. Colonialism and caste system in India have complicated land distribution in India, and even after independence, the ownership of land remains a major reason for conflicts among Indians. People from the marginalized sections like Dalits, tribal communities, and landless farmers are still fighting for their right to own lands. Like Aboriginal communities of Australia, the tribal communities of India have a deep relation with their land. Their land surrounded by the forest play an important role in their livelihood and shaping their culture and identity. India has witnessed many powerful rebellions against dispossession of land, such as the Santhal insurrection, the Munda rebellion, and Jharkhand movement. The development projects like dam constructions, mining, establishment of industries, etc., are posing threat to the lives and lands of people Although there are laws and constitutional provisions to protect the tribal lands, people are losing their land and cannot claim the ownership of their land. The clash in some of the land laws and property rights worsen the disputes related to tribal land. For the upliftment of these communities, it is important to address the issue of dispossession of land. Thank you.
Thank you, Minnie Moore. So, for your paper. So we will move to the next presenter, the last one.
Yes, I am Father Baiju, research scholar at Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda and Educational Institute, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. Myself and my guide, Logesh Kumar, Dr. Logesh Kumar, presenting the paper. The title of the paper is Facilitating Parental Involvement and Support for the Implementation of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan Scheme towards Inclusion of Students with Intellectual Disability in Palakkad District of Kerala. Introduction. Samagra Shiksha scheme was introduced in 2018, the central government, as a continuation of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, and also teacher education together. They coupled together and one scheme that is called Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. By enhancing the program, child-centered practice, and successful effective teaching methods, the Samagra Shiksha scheme to make education at the elementary, secondary, and high secondary level usable and meaningful for students with intellectual disability. The role of parental participation in child's education has been well noted. Teachers play a vital role in actively encouraging parental participation in their child's education. The present investigation established that positive family participation is essential for children's growth. Parental involvement in inclusive education. Since parent involvement is much more common in preschool and primary level than it is in a middle school or secondary school, the majority of the research on parental involvement has been done with the younger children and their families. Inclusive education is a means of improving all students' involvement in school, including those with children with disabilities. The result of this study suggests the importance of school relating to policy and actively involving parents, as well as introduction of the Samagra Shiksha scheme and support group in the Kerala's Palakkad district to enhance parent involvement in the school of students with the intellectual disability. Objective of the study: to find out the availability of Samagra Shiksha schemes implemented for students with intellectual disability in inclusive setting in the Palakkad district of Kerala. Second, to find out the accessibility of Samagra Shiksha scheme for students with intellectual disability in the Palakkad district of Kerala. Methodology: the research is conducted using a descriptive survey procedure. Description of observed phenomena to use data to explain current condition and procedure, or to devise more intelligent strategies for changing them. This approach aims to investigate and explain the phenomena in its natural environment concerning its current situation. Sample: in this study, the researcher collected some data from 56 parents were chosen as a sample population, and purposely sampling was used to select the study samples. Tool used in the present study: the data collection was collected through a questionnaire consisting of 20 statements, all refer to the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan available and accessibility for students with intellectual disability. This 20 statement is in the questionnaire were finalized after a thorough evaluation and modification by experts from special education and special inclusive education. Data collection procedure: the respondents filled the questionnaire, which covered the different items focusing on the parents' personal information, and a statement that were focused on the implementation of the Samagra Shiksha towards inclusion of students with intellectual disability in Palakkad district of Kerala. In the present study, the data A collection procedure was carried out in 4 stages to help the purpose of the study. The tool was sent out to each parent of a student with an intellectual disability studying in the school of Palakkad district of Kerala. Variables of the study. It consists of variables such as gender, locality, age, type of family, employment status, educational qualification, and socio-economic status that will be taken into consideration in the present study. Data analysis. The statistical package for social science, SPSS 20, will be used to enable suitable data analysis. Major finding of the study. First research question. What is the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme available for students with intellectual disability in an inclusive setting in the Palakkad district of Kerala? The mean percentage score level of availability of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme implemented for students with intellectual disability in the inclusive setting in the Palakkad district of Kerala is 50.93%, which indicate that the level of availability of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme is good or medium. The coefficient variation indicates that this score is not stable as the value is more than 20%. To test whether the sample information that we observe exists in the population or to verify that the level of availability of Samagra Shiksha scheme is good. Second research question. How far Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is accessible for students with intellectual disability in the inclusive setting in the Palakkad district of Kerala? The mean percentage score level of accessibility of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme implemented for students with intellectual disability in an inclusive setting in the Palakkad district of Kerala is 49.18%, which indicates that the level of accessibility of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme is average. The coefficient variation indicates that this score is stable as the value is less than 20. To test whether the sample information that we observe exists in the population or to verify that the level of accessibility of Samagra Shiksha scheme is average. Delimitation of the study. The research study was restricted to the Palakkad district of Kerala. The present study covers parental involvement and support in the implementation of Samagra Shiksha scheme for students with intellectual disability in the Palakkad district of Kerala. The sample size is limited to 56. Conclusion. Parental participation in school makes a lot of sense in items of achieving an equal education for their disabled children who have yet to speak up to themselves. Parenting practice towards involvement and support in the Samagra Shiksha scheme motivated their purpose to become active in their children's education, which is eventually benefited their children's learning. The finding of the study find out that the involvement and support of parents has increased availability and accessibility of facilities and services needed for the implementation of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme towards the inclusion of students with intellectual disability in Palakkad district of Kerala. Thank you. Thank you for your patience listening.
Thank you, Mr. Baiju.
Yes.
So I appreciate all the 4 speakers. This was the last presenter, right, Mr. Bishmal Kumar?
Yes.
This was the last presenter.
Ma'am, in the list, there is one more presenter, Shubhangi. However, I saw that she has not logged in. So we assume that this was the last presentation.
Sorry, ma'am. No, there is no such presenter now. Only 3 presenters were there, ma'am. See, resource person.
Okay. So all the 3 presenters, the title of the papers were very relevant. The topic was is very updated, and the first presenter really gave a very nice presentation. She point out the gap between the law and the theory and the law in practice. Of course, she pointed in her presentation in various forms while finding the pathways for using school legal aid clinics for enhancing access to justice to marginalized communities. We see that learning in law school is actually not sufficient for students to practice in the court of law. We also find the gap between the law and society. We can see in language, we can see in the vocabulary. Philosophical values are different. So indeed, so your paper was really very updated and relevant. The next presenter, Abhimanyu, you spoke 15 minutes. The title of the paper was 15 Minutes of Fame and TikTok. The very starting theme or the tagline which you put up, that internet is not free, rather you are free. So this sum up the entire your entire research. What important conclusion you brought out was that Indian psychology has not the research on Indian psychology has not been conducted. So indeed, the theoretical perspective was really good. So we need to have more data on that. So I really appreciate Abhimanyu. I was really hearing very sincerely your paper as you was proceeding. Yeah. So the next presenter was Minyomor PG. She talked about land rights as human rights. Of course, we all know that everyone has a right to own a piece of land. The tillers of the soil must have the right to own a piece of land. They should not only have distribution of land, but we also need redistribution of land. And rightly, P.V. Narasimha Rao have said that we all need to throw the big bubbles from the zamindari system. So we need to continuously evaluate those things, whether it has been executed or not. And the last presenter, Mr. Baiju, your paper was also relevant and updated. I really appreciate all the 4 presenters. There was a little bit of miscommunication, or you say because of the lack of time, and there was a miscommunication of the name of the papers with the title. So I know that you were busy, or might be I ignored some of the text. With this, I hand over this session to the organizers. Thank you.
So thank you so much, ma'am, and every presenter for sharing your valuable knowledge. And it's been a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I now hand over to Krishanu Dev to conclude today's session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vishal. So from the morning, it was a great session. First, we started with our college principal addressing, and then the vice principal addressing. Then we came to the keynote speaker, which was a mind-blowing experience for us to hear us, Dr. S.K. Ramani. And lastly, we are really thankful to each and every participant who has joined, and also to all the persons who have chaired. Thank you, sir and madam. It was a great honor for us to hear your comments.